sleep is a story of light and that it's so crucial for us to understand that in order to begin to get our sleep right, we got to get our light right. And most people, you might hear this and then just think, well, that's so basic. I mean, what? Do I just turn off the lights at night or, have a dark room? I've heard this. Turns out that the practical application of what we're talking about might be a bit more layered.
Our DNA, our genes have not changed since we were cave people. Back then, if the sun had not come up yet or the sun had gone down, the only color light we saw was from a fire.
Yeah.
So you think red, orange, that's all we're meant to see. So if you look outside, if you're in an office building, if you're in your home, especially those people who live in, the Northeast in winter and it's dark outside, your body wants it to be dark inside. So you think about how many times we are not aligning with that piece of our body's innate intelligence, right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the impact that that has on our health, maybe our mood, our sleep, and then all the things that we can do to help mitigate it. I think this is some of the most powerful information, or at least what I'm super passionate about.
One, so that the listener can find themselves in this conversation, it might be important to note that in 2023, I mentioned, I believe, the scientific consensus. Now, it pointed to the fact that the average person is by day they're in and swimming in an environment that is around 100 times too dim as compared to our ancestors. And the evening is around 100 times too bright as compared to even the brightest moonlit evenings, which, by the way, there's thinkings that, lunar and lunatic might have had origins kind of together of acting out of accordance when it would be the timing of the moon and what have you, because that light from the moon really was one of our only other light sources outside of, to your point, with fire, which fire is so crucial. It's like one of our first ever biohacks, basically, to extend the days. Before, there was presumably a whole period when humans just they were totally tethered to the rhythms of nature. And then we had our first sort of the flint and the whole thing, and then we make a fire, and then we're able to expand our days a little bit, but it's still, it's expensive sort of resources. You got to get the wood, you got to do all these things. It progressed to candles and lanterns, but often that had a price attached to it, to the oils and to burn these candles. So it was actually kind of a hierarchy of classes that could even have extra light and stay up later. So there's all this sort of history right behind the management of how we would have lived our lifestyles. But now there's kind of, I guess you could say, on the bright side, no pun intended, that there's been a democratization of the aspect of being able to expand our days 24/7, have a Vegas lifestyle. So you could look at that as being an advancement, but it turns out from a biological perspective, we have totally unforeseen impacts on our biology. So out of that same scientific consensus, it was referencing 200 and almost 50 circadian scientists pulling from almost 2,700 peer-reviewed publications, all calling for warning labels on the light bulbs when used at night. And why would that be? Well, because they found that not only was that impacting our sleep-wake cycles, but also things that might be unexpected, like you pointed to. So the waistline piece, so obesity, diabetes, cancers, psychiatric disorders, reproductive disorders. So all these far-reaching impacts just simply by using a light bulb, a 60-watt light bulb in your living room at night could be having all these impacts. That's what we're starting to understand, especially since around the 80s into the 90s, much more of a push around using energy efficient bulbs, LEDs, and LEDs having a much wider band of these cool tones. So particularly a lot of blue light, a little bit of green, but certainly not this beautiful rainbow that we would experience from the sun. And also that's very different from Edison's light bulb, which was invented about 145 years ago. That was the incandescent light bulb, and it's now unfortunately illegal to purchase. And that was just made illegal last year, unfortunately, in the United States anyway. And so the incandescent light bulb was sort of like if you go into those, fancy restaurants that were romantic and you see the Edison bulb and it's like warm and almost borderline candlelight vibes. It was much more akin to fire than as far as the wavelengths of light. And so it was much less disruptive. Still allowed to augment our days and still a little outside of the bounds of what we would have had previously, but at least it was warmer tones and a little less disruptive and excitatory. Whereas then when we started in the 80s and 90s, shifting over to this LED centric approach from an energy efficient, energy conservation perspective, then not foreseeing the impact that this could make to our biology. And so now, what do we do in the face of that, considering that the average person is spending well over, it appears, 93% of their time indoors? And that's an old stat from 2001. It's likely much more pronounced now post pandemic, work from home sort of revolution, smartphones, laptops, all the things. So then it's as simple as how can we get ourselves outside more routinely? Because if you measure the light in your indoor environment, it's most routinely sub around 1,000 lux. If you're lucky, most of them even less, so say like 200, 300 lux or what have you. Especially, I've measured all over the place in Starbucks and all these things. And you can measure this with download apps like Light Meter, or Lux, or what have you. And you can just hold up your smartphone and see what's the light environment measurably in your space. Versus when you go outside, even on a cloudy day, it's going to have markedly more light exposure most often than you could possibly get outside or inside. So you want to be getting yourself physically outside as much as you can, as bright of days as possible. But then when the sun is setting, then you're looking to do exactly what you just said. So moving over your lighting to fire-like light. So it would be oranges and reds so that it mimics what we would have been exposed to, that fiery nature.
Hey, we'll get right back to the episode, but I want to share one of my favorite incredible tools with you. I am obsessed with the sauna space glow light. Our whole family loves it, and it's like having the benefits of morning and evening sunlight without having to step outside, especially when it's just not accessible, whether the weather is too cold or you're stuck at work all day. The red light therapy uses infrared technology to boost your energy, mood, and even your sleep. This is perfect for those days when you can't get outside but still want all the benefits of the natural light. I use this to start my day feeling grounded or to help me and our family wind down at night. It's so simple and easy to incorporate into your routine. If you've been wanting an easy way to bring the power of infrared technology into your life, check the links in the show description for my epic discount on Glow Light by Sauna Space. Now back to the show.
My husband makes fun of me about things like this, so he'll call me Darth Vader because I have all red lights everywhere. But somehow along the way, he's come to actually appreciate them. And now he even himself travels with like red motion lights and all the things. So eventually, once you're in that environment, you start to appreciate. And then when you do flip on the overhead, big, egregious, fluorescent-y LED light, it's like jarring. But we tend to swim in these environments that just because of the familiarity effect from the fact that we have it, that this is just how life always was. So even though it's really a relatively new thing, so when that does happen, it's very, very alarming. And the other piece to remember is that our eyes become more sensitive throughout the course of the day. So that same exposure, so say whatever, your same light bulb that you might have at 8 a.m. is going to be more impactful at 8 p.m. because of the fact that our eyes just it's almost their own circadian rhythm, and the sensitivity goes up throughout the course of the day.
If you like that, you'll enjoy the full version, and you can get that simply by clicking here. Be sure to also subscribe so you don't miss any future content.